So the first one is the one who is insane or mentally challenged. They don't have to fast. They're not required by Islamic law to fast, and that's clear. The second category is the Haydh and the Nufasa. The Haydh is the woman in her cycle in Haydh, not istihada. During Haydh, fasting is prohibited. In fact, if a woman knows that she is in the state of Haydh and she deliberately fasts, that's a sin, that's a violation, because fasting is an ibadah, it's an act of worship. So the conditions must be fulfilled for it to be an act of worship. Nufasa is postpartum bleeding after birth. In that state, fasting, not only is it not required, but it's also invalid. Yes, for the minor menstruation, which is called istihada, we examined the rules of it last year. A woman must fast. But in order for the fasting to be accepted, she has to see in what stage of istihada is she. In some stages, a ghusl is required. If that ghusl is not observed, the fast will be invalid. Otherwise, no ghusl is required for, let's say, the istihada al-qalila, if the bleeding is minor. That's something that we discussed last year when we examined the types of hayd. So that's the second category. The third category that scholars have discussed is the marid, the one who's sick or ill, and the sickness harms his health. We'll have a detailed discussion on this later, but the siyam must be harmful. Now, how do we establish that this is harmful? Either you, between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you believe this could harm you, fasting in that state of sickness could harm you, or your doctor tells you. But in the end, you have to follow your own conviction. If you go to the doctor, and let's say the doctor tells you fasting will harm you, you don't believe that the doctor is correct in their assessment. Do you go by your assessment or the doctor's assessment?
My assessment.
You have to go by your assessment. A doctor's assessment is religiously binding if it gives you confidence. If you have confidence that the doctor knows what fasting is, and they don't have any prejudices towards fasting, because these days sometimes any pregnant woman, if she goes to a doctor, yeah, don't fast, don't fast. Yes, it's true, if fasting harms the pregnant woman or the fetus in any way, she does not fast. But sometimes doctors have a preconceived notion that any type of fasting for a pregnant woman, no, we're not even open to discussing it. So you have to have the confidence. You have to have the confidence that this is harmful. Once you have that confidence, it's haram to fast. I know people in Shahr Ramadan who are sick, they force themselves to fast. That's a violation of Islamic law, and that fast is not valid. They have to redo it. Tell them, you have to redo it. So what's the point of you forcing yourself to fast? If you believe that this is harming you, you can't fast. So that's the third category of people. The fourth category of people is the traveler. The Quran makes it very clear that the traveler cannot fast. Traveling for any reason that's not haram. Because if you travel for a sinful purpose, yes, in that case you would have to keep your fast and the salah is full. But if it's a legitimate reason, it's not a haram reason. When we say legitimate, that means it does not involve a sin. A person cannot fast while traveling. Now there's one misconception that most people have, especially in this community, that if you fast in Shahr Ramadan just to break your fast, that's haram, that's not allowed. Yeah, if you travel, let's say you go to Ann Arbor, and your only reason is to break your fast that day. You don't really have any business in Ann Arbor. A lot of people think this is wrong, meaning that it's haram. That is not haram. According to Islamic law, you can travel just to break your fast. It's makruh, it's unrecommended, sure, because you're missing out on the thawab of Shahr Ramadan. on the ajr of Shahr Ramadan. But that's allowed in Islamic law. As long as you're not going there for a sin, for a sinful purpose, you actually have to break your fast. So you'll find a lot of people on the Eid of their family members, they do that. They want to celebrate Eid with them, they'll travel. That's okay. Some people have a long day of exams and midterms and whatever it is, and they need to concentrate. They travel at Fajr, after Fajr they break their fast and come back. That's fine. Islamically, there is no restriction on that. I know a lot of people will argue with you and tell you, no, this is wrong. Allah legislates, we don't legislate. Allah is the one who legislates. The Quran is very clear. Whoever is on safar, ala safarin, doesn't matter what the reason of that safar is, as long as it's not a sinful trip, then in that case, you break your fast. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, brother.
Just to comment, I know people in Lebanon, they make a business out. They can, in Shahr Ramadan, they take people out from their village to the required distance to fast and bring them back every day.
Just so that they would break their fast.
And it's a business.
That's fine. It's not a haram business.
And they have a fatwa from Maraja that they can do it.
Yes, they can do it because that person traveling to the legal distance and going back is not a haram thing to do. So if I'm assisting that person and I even operate a business under that, it's not haram. See, brothers and sisters, when it comes to haram and halal, we have to see what Sharia states. We can't come up with our own notions. Sharia defines what's halal and what's haram. And Sharia is very clear. If you travel for any purpose, even if it's to get away from the fasting, you have that right. Allah has given you that right. Allah says, okay, you're not going to fast now, I'll require it later. Fine. As long as it's not a sinful trip. You're not going there to do a sinful thing. So even if they operate a business out of that, from a Sharia perspective, it's not haram. Because they're not aiding anyone in doing haram. See, a lot of people will say, yeah, but you're helping them evade the law of God. No, he's not evading the law of God. The law of God is if you travel, you don't have to fast. Fast later. He's not evading anything. What is he evading? They're not evading the law of God. Because the law of God has given them that option.
But we just said it is makruh.
It's makruh. Makruh means that you're missing out on such a great ajr that Sharia would like you not to travel unless it's urgent or for a very important purpose. It's for your own maslahah, it's for your own goodness. By the way, if you help someone do something that's makruh, is that haram?
No.
It's not haram, right? There are things that are makruh in Sharia. If you help people do them, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Eating beef is makruh. If you have a store and you sell beef, is that haram? Obviously not. There are many things that are makruh to eat. It's not haram for you to sell them. Just as an example, helping people do that which is makruh is not haram.
So it's eating beef.
Because it's optional. Yes, eating beef in Islamic law is makruh. Eating lamb is highly, highly recommended. But beef and chicken is makruh. Yes, even chicken. Scientifically, even they categorize, the types of meat. So the first, today they'll tell you healthy meats are fish, lamb. Then you have the category of beef. Then you have the category of chickens and birds. And the last worst type of meat is pork, which even scientists do agree that it's very harmful. And it causes many, many diseases. The worst of the meats is bacon and pork. This is proven by science. Yes, beef is makruh. Now, if someone, scholars say, occasionally eats it, once a week, once every 10 days, once a month, then this person is not engaging in makruh acts frequently, that's fine. But if every day you eat beef, oh yeah, all scholars will tell you it's makruh. You have hadiths about it, very clear hadiths. Is this a surprise to you? Yes. But lamb is highly mustahab. Lamb is highly mustahab. Beef is makruh. Chicken is makruh.
One day beef, one day chicken, one day fish, one day beef, one day chicken, one day fish.
That's fine. It's not haram. There's nothing wrong with that. But if someone wants to observe the full Islamic healthy diet, which has health effects, which has spiritual effects, by the way, then yes.
Is the goat counted in beef?
Yes. Goat is, no. Goat is a type of lamb.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are there any
And being strictly vegetarian is also not recommended in Islamic law. Yeah, at least every 40 days it's mustahab to eat meat. Avoiding meat altogether, unless you have a medical condition that warrants that, that's different. Or let's say someone has very high cholesterol and they have special circumstances. But generally speaking, being vegetarian is makruh. It has negative impacts, the hadith states, on your spirit and also on your akhlaq. On your akhlaq. The Imam was asked about someone with a bad attitude, nasty attitude. The Imam ﷺ said to this person, it seemed that this person was strictly vegetarian. The Imam ﷺ recommended eating meat every once in a while. It does have positive effects.
So what's the logic behind the Hindu religion promoting vegetarian?
The Hindu religion, they consider many types of animals to be sacred, like the cow, so they avoid it. That's the real reason why they avoid it. Because to them, slaughtering a cow is a violation. It's like killing something sacred. That's why. Yes, maybe they may have other philosophies behind it. In any case, brothers and sisters, when it comes to fasting, traveling just to break your fast is not haram. And that's something that's clearly stated in our ahadith. Now, when it comes to traveling, we have a number of exceptions. If you're a frequent traveler, obviously you keep your fast. We talked about that in the book of Salah. If you stay in a place 10 or more days, you keep your fast. If you go to your hometown, even if it's for one day, you keep your fast. By the way, those 4 areas where you can pray full, like Mecca, Medina, the shrine of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Kufa, that only applies to Salah. If you're a traveler there, you cannot fast. That's something to keep in mind. So in these categories, you do keep your fast. What else? What type of traveler can fast? This is something we'll examine in detail in the book of Hajj. But basically, the one who does the Hajj al-Tamattu', who comes from faraway lands, he's not a resident of Mecca. For those who live outside of Mecca, like us for example, we do Hajj al-Tamattu'. In Hajj al-Tamattu', sacrificing a sheep, which is called the hadi, is necessary. It's a religious obligation. If someone does not have the money to sacrifice that sheep, the alternative is what? No, the alternative is to fast 3 days during the Hajj. Fasting 3 days during the Hajj. Basically, this person who does not find a sheep or doesn't have the money to buy a sheep, they will fast 3 days. Or the one who deliberately leaves the land of Arafah before ghurub. Arafah is the 9th of the Al-Hujjah. All Hujjaj and pilgrims must be in the land of Arafah. You have to stay there from noon till sunset. You cannot leave the land of Arafah before sunset. If someone without an urgent excuse, right? If someone leaves Arafah before sunset, what do they have to do? The kafara for that is to give a camel. The kafara for that is to give a camel. Let's say someone does not have the money to give that kafara. They will fast 18 days. Now they're a traveler. And when you travel, you cannot fast. But they will fast 18 days. Or the one who fasts 3 days if they cannot find the sheep. They're traveling during the Hajj. They're not staying there 10 full days. However, they will fast. These are exceptions. There is one final exception that scholars have mentioned. If you make a vow, a nadhr, to fast a particular day, even if you know you will be traveling that day, you have that right. Let's say I know February 1st I'm going to New York. I make the niyyah right now to make a religious vow, nadhr, that I will fast February 1st. Qurbatan ila Allah Ta'ala. It's mustahab fasting. I don't have any wajib fasting, right, that I have to make up. It's mustahab fast. Since I made the nadhr and the vow to fast that day, even if I knew I'm going to travel, I can fast that day as a traveler. So I'll be traveling, but I'm still fasting. That's an exception.
So you can really break your fast on any travel and make that niyyah every time?
Yes. Anytime you travel, if you insist on making the niyyah to fast while traveling, you can make another, with the exception of the month of Ramadan. You can't. Because in the month of Ramadan, we only have one type of valid fasting, which is Siyam Shahr Ramadan. You can't do nadhr in month of Ramadan. So outside the month of Ramadan, anytime you travel, and you really want to fast for whatever reason during your travels, you can make a nadhr beforehand. Before you start traveling, before that day comes, make a nadhr, make a religious vow, that on that day I'm going to fast, qurbatan Allah Ta'ala, and you can fast. Yes, that is an exception that scholars have mentioned, and the author talks about it. Otherwise, fasting while traveling is haram. According to the school of Ahlul Bayt, it's not optional to break your fast while traveling. You must break your fast while traveling.
Yeah, but the nadhr is optional.
The nadhr is an exception. The nadhr is a vow that I will fast on that day. This overrides the traveling. Even if you happen to travel on that day, since you made a nadhr to fast that particular day, in that case, you keep it. This is an exception to the law. The general ruling, you cannot fast while traveling. There are exceptions, like being a frequent traveler, that's an exception. Being in your watan, that's an exception, right? One of the exceptions is what? Is if you make a nadhr, you can fast. The last category that the author discusses on page 13, before we move on to the mufattarat, is al-mughma alayh, the one in a coma. The one in a coma, fasting is not required from them, and even if they wake up from that coma, they gain their consciousness, even after a month, do they have to make up any missed fasting? No. Because during that moment, they are not obligated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fast. So let's say someone was in a coma for the entire month of Ramadan. They don't need to make it up. This is not like the one who's sleeping, let's say. If you sleep the whole day in month of Ramadan, right? And you, let's say, never made the niyyah, obviously you would have to make it up. But when it comes to the mughma alayh, the one who has lost consciousness, they do not have to fast, they do not have to make